Welcome back. My name is Roaring Sparrow, and we're doing some historically accurate dogfighting. This is the ME 163, the Comet, against the Spitfire LF Mark 9, the low flying Mark 9, one of the best turning planes that the Allies ever fielded. And we're doing the duels. I go into a lag turn. I'm taking him into the two circle. I'm going to abuse the vertical. I'm using the vertical. And I'm going to out-energy him. Now, if he had played his plane just better, he would have hit that shot, and I would have exploded in a ball of fire and death. But because I am the superior player and understand my plane just that much better, it's not to be. I deploy the landing flaps here just to cut the radius. I cut inside of him, and it looks like he's lost control here, and he gets me into a really cheeky stall over here, and he's going to come in behind me, but I'm going to go back into the vertical because I'm a rocket plane and he is not a rocket plane. And we're just gonna pull in behind him and just fucking shoot him like it's the ME 163. Like, if you played War Thunder for a long time, you know what this plane is. You know what this plane does, and what it does is basically shits on anything that it can get close to. This is pretty much all of the rocket planes, the ME 163, the Key 200, the BI, all of them more or less play the same. You get close to people, and if they dogfight you, they lose. If they can't outrun you, they also lose. It's as simple as that. But why am I making this video? Why are we shooting down a Spitfire with an ME 163? Well, it's because of this. Because Redditors wanted something like this. There was a Reddit post of putting planes at battle ratings based on their historical first flight date or historically when they entered service. And this is part of what it would look like, is moving the ME-163B and the B0 all the way down to 6.0/6.3 and being contemporary to American planes like the P-63A5, P-47D22, F-7F1, P-51D5, P-47D28, like, you know, all of the stuff that kind of makes up the US 4.0 to call it 5.3 rating range. The exception, I think, on this list is kind of like the F-7F, which sits at 6.3 in-game, because lots of guns and good pointability go burr. And this would be a terrible idea. You would actually not want to play this, and it reminds me of the meme that made it in the War Thunder sim, sort of like, who wants historical matchups? Everyone does. But who wants to play the underdog? And it's like, nobody does. And this is the most obvious use case of a plane in War Thunder behaving in a way that is not true to real life. Because in real life, this thing was fucking terrible. This thing killed its pilots in droves. Its real life kill-to-death ratio was something like, it was able to kill 10 planes at the cost of 14 of its own, and most of the time those deaths were takeoffs and landings. Like, the plane used a two-part fuel that you mix them together and it basically does an explosion, and they vented out the back. And because the workmanship was not very good, because the fuel was highly volatile, it's really just doing anything in this plane just kind of caused it to explode or melt the pilot. Just all kinds of really terrible bad things happened with this plane. It was kind of a total non-factor in the war. But within War Thunder, the way that it's modeled is, number one, the rocket engine is adjustable. You can adjust the throttle percentage anywhere between 0 and 100, and it will conserve fuel. So it means that your 6 minutes of fuel, if you turn it down to 30%, you'll get an hour of flight time out of it. And that hour of flight time, especially when compared to props, you're still faster than every single prop in the game at 30% throttle. And it's not even like slightly faster, it's like 100 kilometers per hour levels of faster. Not only that, this plane outturns pretty much every prop in the game, minus maybe something like the A7M can rotate on its axis and do its whole thing where it turns completely in place. Maybe. But because of the rocket motor, this plane always just has the option of just going up. If you are on low fuel and you point this plane up and you 100% throttle it, you can get up to 5,000 meters in more or less just a straight vertical climb. It is that good. And what this means is, if you put it against anything historical, anything remotely historical, it slaps the shit out of them. And the thing is, it's already been done before. When this plane was introduced, it fought things like the F-8F, and it had an airspawn, it had a slightly different flight model, and that was 10 years ago. And guess what? Guess where the player behavior gravitated towards? Player behavior in War Thunder gravitates towards whatever the most overpowered piece of shit is, especially for whatever time of month it is. There's no reason to play props against this thing, because it's not fair. It's not possible. I have dueled at least 3 different people at this point, and the record right now for the ME-163, just casually getting people to do historical dogfights, is something like 75-0. Like, the fights that I'm showing here are the ones that got sort of close. Like, if you do everything right, if you maneuver in such a way that you can force it to overshoot, you can pitch in for like one single desperation shot that has to hit one of the smallest planes in the game. Like right now, I'm 2v1ing, and I'm just ignoring the P-47 that's behind me because I just figure I'm too small and he won't hit me. I actually I took damage there because I actually collided with the P-51 on my screen. But, guess what? P-47 didn't do any damage to us, so we're just chilling. Now we're just going to loop over him, and he's not going to be able to do anything. And he has no options. There is no counterplay. Because he's not faster, he doesn't dive better, he doesn't climb better, he doesn't turn better. If he tries to run away, it doesn't matter if he goes straight down. I will still out-accelerate him, and I will still catch up to him. There is nothing that he can do. And if you do this en masse, if you do this at scale, it really is just going to result in like Germany Farming Simulator 2.0. And this is the problem that all of the people advocating for historical accuracy kind of don't see, is that the planes within War Thunder don't exist in the same context they did in real life. And they also don't have a lot of the same flaws modeled. Which means that if you make the game historical, you also make the game completely unbalanced. And based on past behavior, the unbalanced side is going to be the one that becomes the most popular, and the non-powerful side is going to be the one that people don't want to play, because fighting Yak 3U against ME-163 is not fun. Fighting anything against the ME-163 that can't reasonably outrun it is completely busted, is completely unfair, and creates a completely uninteresting dynamic. This plane will get behind you, and it can pull 14 Gs out of its ass, and you are not doing anything against this in any kind of World War II fighter. And while this dynamic is blatantly apparent for the rocket planes, it's not completely unapplicable to other quote-unquote historical matchups. Things like P-40 versus J-2M2. That is something that is on the list as being contemporary to each other. There's nothing a P-40 can do. It's not faster, it doesn't climb better, it doesn't turn better. There are 0 situations that the J2M2 realistically should lose. And a lot of this also comes down to the way that Gaijin has decided to model Axis versus Allied planes. Generally speaking, the stuff that Germany gets is pretty optimistically modeled. It's modeled in such a way that you're usually getting a later version of that plane than what entered service. This is a good example, is like the 109 F4 represents kind of like the F4 towards the end of its lifespan, where it has like a higher manifold pressure setting. The same thing goes for the BF-109K4. It entered service, I want to say, in October of 1944, but the engine pressure setting, the manifold pressure setting that it is running, was something that never got implemented until like February or March of 1945, and even then, that manifold pressure setting seems to have seen very limited use in service. Whereas if you compare the P-51D5, the World War II one, if you were going to make that historically accurate, if you were going to make it represent a plane post-D-Day in the 8th Air Force, it would be running 72 or 75 inches of manifold pressure. It would be identical to either the P-51D10 or the P-51D30. Which means that a lot of these historical matchups even if you implemented them, wouldn't actually be historically accurate.